Hey, greetings and salutations, and welcome to another edition of HeteroHIV. I'm your host and moderator, Reggie Smith, and I want to thank all of you for joining us, and a special shout out to all of my friends over at the Positive Attitudes 12-Step Support Group for Heterosexuals that meets every Thursday at 6 p.m. Now, we know there's a lot of groups out here, a lot of support groups out here for people living with HIV and those that are impacted. And in very few cases are there any for heterosexuals. And so sometimes we need a group like that so that we can share some of the things that are specific to our lives. And so if you have any questions for our guests later on, and if you'd like to join our group, it's a 12-step group. We know that 12-step groups work. Join us on Thursdays at 6 p.m. At the information down below, and we'll get you some more information later on. If you've got any questions about that later in the show, text me or Dion, and we'll ask them during the course of the show, all right? You know, some of the things that we get a chance to talk about in our support groups, and one of the things that I always talk about is when I was diagnosed with portions. As afraid as I was of dying, I had experienced already the miracle of recovery from heroin and cocaine addiction. So I felt like miracles were possible, and I was certainly eligible to receive another one. You know, it's hard to imagine now a world where there was no treatments for HIV, but that was the case back then. There was a lot of fear in the hearts of those who are diagnosed with HIV, and maybe even a greater fear in the hearts of those still living the lifestyle that had the consequence of contracting HIV, but had not yet contracted the virus. You know, that fear is what caused a lot of the stigma, and I would go so far as to say that fear also caused a lot of death. I saw way too many cases where a person would get diagnosed and told that they would live 6 months, and then they would make choices, and it really caused them to live only 5 months in the fear of what was going to happen in the 6 months. They didn't want to see what life was going to be like. It was such a grotesque manner that people were dying from. You know, I made the decision then that I wasn't going to let HIV scare me to death. I had a few years' experience of overcoming addictions, and it became clear that I was addicted to more than just heroin and cocaine, and that some of those other addictions could kill me too. You know, once I believed that smoking cigarettes, eating toxins and fear-filled meats, and living a stress-filled life could be more than just bad for me, but also life-threatening, I decided to use the same tools and strategies and support that I had used to recover from addictions on those behaviors as well. Just like there was no medications back then, 35, 40 years ago, there was very little support for plant-based or holistic lifestyles back then either. Doctors and medical professionals were under great pressure to come up with some answers because many people were suffering and dying due to all kinds of opportunistic infections. Not many people felt empowered enough to look for and or try new or out-of-the-box healing solutions or cures. Some of us thought that the government had something to do with the creation of HIV, or at least they had very little interest in finding the cure. I mean, hell, Ronald Reagan wouldn't even say AIDS. Many people back then thought it was a nasty disease that only gay men contracted. That's kind of how the stigma got started in the first place. Well, through God's grace, I was able to stop smoking cigarettes and stop eating meat, and I started using herbs and natural methods to heal holistically. I still had high viral loads and low T-cell counts and bouts with infections, but I was able to survive long enough for science to create medications worth trying. Over time, medications have gotten much better, and my holistic lifestyle has complemented their use. In my latest book, Resurrection, Participate in Your Own Salvation or Be Complicit in Your Own Demise, I write about how I almost died in 2005 because I didn't trust the medications, I didn't trust the medical professionals, and I certainly didn't trust the government. But because I was so sick, I was compelled to start taking antivirals as a last resort, and lo and behold, they worked. And they've been working ever since. In 1989, I told a good friend of mine, Bernard, on his deathbed, that I was going to stick around for the cure. And we're closer now to that than we ever have been before. I mean, personally, I'm currently taking a couple of shots every 2 months, and there are even longer acting medicines on the horizon. Time, courage, effort, and innovation have brought us a long way and made it possible for there to be a large community of long-term survivors of HIV. We now know from our experiences that there is a holistic approach, including spirit, mind, and body, that has a measurable positive effect on the health outcomes of people living with HIV and everybody else. We continue to evolve in our understanding of wellness, and we are ever closer to a functional cure for HIV. Now, I claim to be healed just for today from HIV because we know that positive attitudes are an important part of wellness. So, on this edition of HeteroHIV, we're going to spend some time one-on-one with Dr. Vince Marconi, discussing the state of the union as it pertains to HIV. Now, he's one of the most authentic, beloved medical professionals and providers in our community. And he's involved intimately with the holistic approach to healing and the work being done to find a cure for HIV. So, without further ado, let me welcome Dr. Vince Marconi to HeteroHIV. How you doing, Dr. Vince?
Hey, Reggie, great to see you as always, and a huge privilege and honor to be here on the program with you and your audience.
And the pleasure is ours, and we really love what you do in the community. And you've been on the show before. I didn't want to spend a lot of time with your bio, but suffice it to say that you're very much loved in the community and that you've been serving in the. How long have you been working in the Atlanta area and in the field of HIV?
In the Atlanta area, it's been 15 years, and in HIV, it's been probably close to 35 years or so, something around that. About 30 years. Yeah.
What kind of changes have you seen as far as HIV is concerned over the time that you've been working in the field?
Well, it's incredible. Sort of beginning back, I was a phlebotomist in a hospital in Florida back in the early 90s. I was actually paying my way through college, and at the time, I was really the only person who would draw blood on people with HIV. Let's just say that where I worked, there was a lot of fear, and so people were dying. This was like 92, 93. This was before we had highly effective treatment available, the cocktails. And so, there was a lot of stigma around the disease, but I had a family member who had passed away from AIDS just about a year or so before that. So I was connected very much to that reality. And I also was friends with a few brothers down in Florida who themselves had gotten HIV through blood transfusions when they were small children. And so I had a very kind of personal connection to the disease, and I found it as a mission even before becoming a doctor to serve the community in one way or another. And so thinking back to those really challenging days that you were describing in your own life, I saw through kind of that vantage point. And then, moved to Baltimore. I was in Baltimore for my medical school, and at that time was right when treatment was finally becoming more effective and people were getting on 3-drug cocktails. But what I had seen in Baltimore was, despite these drugs being available, and even other drugs like blood pressure and diabetes medications, et cetera, patients were coming into the hospital with still advanced HIV. They were coming in with, horrific high blood pressure. They were coming in with diabetes. And in my mind, as a young medical student, I thought, this is strange because we've got all these great drugs, but why they don't seem to be working. I actually started losing faith in the effectiveness of the drugs. And then I moved to Boston in 2000, and here saw a completely different reality, right? So drugs were pretty much the same. Populations were pretty much the same demographically, et cetera. But lo and behold, the patients in Boston seemed to be doing a whole lot better than the patients in Baltimore. And it was around that time that I started realizing and understanding through great mentors that were around me then, is that there was a huge impact of both the structural violence that existed for the populations with HIV and coming from communities where they came, as well as the stigma and the stress that was associated with that stigma and the discrimination outside of the HIV and with the HIV that seemed to be driving both barriers to getting into the care that they needed, but also was affecting them biologically. And you'll see why I'm mentioning this as we talk further through the rest of the day. But essentially, that stress was impacting, much like what you've described many times in your own life and others you know, was affecting them biologically. So not only was it causing barriers to getting the medicines they need, it was preventing them from being able to take it. It was causing depression and stress, but it was also biologically affecting their ability to get healthy because of what they were feeling in their minds and spirits, if that makes sense. And,
Yes.
you know, I saw in Boston, they were able to have a better reality than what was in Baltimore because the community was more invested in people with HIV. They tried to eliminate healthcare and insurance barriers. So there we saw a very different reality. Then to kind of wrap up the story before coming here to Atlanta, I went to the US military and I was working in the military program. And here I saw people thriving incredibly well, healthy, diagnosed early, everything was taken care of. They didn't have to pay for anything. They had all their medications. Of course, they had, they had jobs and they were physically fit. So I got to see all the different realities before moving here to Atlanta, where I was brought back in some ways to some of the experiences in Baltimore, where I found, again, populations significantly disenfranchised, underserved, marginalized. And so then was able to see all the different realities, even across time, and said, I'm going to dedicate myself to both leveling those barriers for our community, as well as finding ways to help out with the biological perturbations that happen from stress and discrimination in their lives.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much for breaking that down for us. And I want to say condolences for your losses. I know even as a doctor that it had to play a big role for you. I mean, from my perspective, as a person that's been diagnosed, there was a survivor's guilt at some point, as well as, and I definitely identify with having done research of sorts as to what was the difference between the experience that I was having and the experience that all of the people that I knew and loved and was losing was having. And that's why often, it was an experiment, but by stopping smoking cigarettes and not eating meat, seeing and then working to live as stress-free a life as possible, it seemed to have at least a better effect. It allowed me to at least stick around long enough for the medications and things like that to evolve and to start working. But it absolutely became clear that spirit is the beginning of everything, and that we're energetic beings, and that the cure may not happen there may be a functional and a biological cure that we'll find. And that's something that I know now, and it's an association with yourself and folks over at Erase HIV. And we'll get a chance to talk about the things that are being done now to find a cure and how close we are. But it's what could I do, as an individual, to empower myself and to participate in my own survival and salvation. And one of the things that I knew from 12-step experiences was support, having a place where we can share with each other and be honest and open and not keep secrets because of the vibration and all of that. But there's just so many things holistically, and we'll get a chance to talk about those things. So we're absolutely, I feel there's a convergence. When we met, I felt a convergence because we have had similar experiences from different perspectives, and there's a convergence because of what I researched in an attempt to save my own life and to maybe share with others. And I get a lot of validation from you because you did what I wouldn't do, and that's went to school and became a doctor. My mother said I could have been anything I wanted. I could have been a lawyer, I could have been a doctor, but instead I chose to be a dope fiend. And as a result, I've had the experience that I'm having, but I'm grateful for it. And I'm grateful that we have you here on the show. So let's talk about some of the things that beyond, before we get to spirit, let's talk about some of the work you do. Microbiomes. Because I talked about our group, our support group, and there are a lot of people now that are long-term survivors. Thank God there's still a lot of us around. And but we still have other issues. And first, maybe you can explain what microbiomes are and why it's an important part, and how it works with inflammation and in the gut and all of that. Maybe you can explain that in a way that people would understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're all familiar with the reality that our guts are essentially open to the outside world, right? We've got an opening at the mouth and we've got an opening at the other end, right? Food and things go on through the mouth side and they come out as, waste out the other side. And so, because of this communication with the outside world, meaning both the food that we have and just our everyday living and exposures to the environment around us, that inner world inside our guts has an ecology. It has a sort of makeup that reflects something that you might see in an environmental condition in your external world. So, like the soil that you go out and plant a flower in, for example, has bacteria that live in that space, right? And that makes up what we call the ecology of that particular space. Well, the same thing exists inside of our gut as it does on the surface of our skin and our mouth. These areas become populated with bacteria. And the bacterial makeup in any space from the opening of your mouth until it exits at the other end has communities of bacteria all along the way. And those communities of bacteria have different makeups, much like the surface of our planet has with different animals and plants and human beings, for example. And so these, what we call communities, the makeup of the communities in those various areas are critical actually to our health. They're not just bystanders as we might imagine they are. They're absolutely critical to the health on the inside of our body through various ways that I'll describe in a moment. But if the makeup of those organisms get altered and changed in a negative way, in a way that doesn't support positive health, that can immensely impact things like you described, inflammation in our immune system. It can impact the way we metabolize our food. And so it affects the composition in our body of fat and muscle and things of that nature, and the vitamins and so forth, minerals. So that's how critical those organisms are inside your gut. And so the fact that it is this sort of delicate balance means that we should pay attention to what we put into our bodies as much as the medications, the food that we eat.
Right,
And so,
right.
yeah. And so essentially, just to round that off, think about your gut in this way that you would think about the planet and how we care for the planet, and we don't want to destroy the planet. We want to make sure that plants and animals don't go the way of extinction. The same thing is true within our gut, that if we lose certain critical bacteria, those impact then our health and well-being, if that makes sense.
Mhm. It absolutely makes sense. And what I heard you say was, if you're eating garbage, then your gut could be a ghetto. And that's the kind of
Absolutely.
community, you and and a lot of times I was thinking about feelings. We have feelings that in our gut. Every cell is like a mind of its own. It's a world of its own, and we're energetic beings and in the physical manifestation. So the fuel that we eat and the food that we eat is a big deal. It's a big deal. The things that we put on our skin, the energy that we take in, what we breathe. So the environment and all of that, medication, antibiotics, they are a big factor to our wellness. And those are the things that we can control. But I asked myself, because it makes sense to people when you tell them that, why wouldn't someone change a behavior if they knew that it was killing them? And because we call that suicide. But I understand that because of my experience with addictions, and so that's why I enjoyed the 12-step programs and the process on trying to break the addictions on how we eat. So what can we do to shift or to be more mindful about the microbiomes? I know to do probiotics and things of that nature. What can we do, um, people that are long-term survivors, to have a more healthier gut?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I mean, the ideal thing is we should have our microbiomes checked, right? And sadly, we're not at a place in our healthcare system where this can be done very easily and at a cost that is acceptable or covered by insurance. But that would be the ideal thing, is that we would all have our microbiome tested, and then one could say, look, you need this one to be improved, that one to be improved, or this one to go away, that one to come back. That would be the ideal circumstance. But short of that, absolutely, things like high fiber diets, resistant starches, as they're called. You were just talking about eating pinto beans, white pinto beans, and gray northern white beans, for example, tend to be really high in those starches. Less ripened bananas, potatoes, things like yucca and plantains, these are really high in those sort of starches. And then the fermented foods, things like kombucha, kefir, yogurts are really terrific. Probiotics, prebiotics, you mentioned, these are all things that really do help improve the microbiome in our guts. And like you said, don't wantonly take antibiotics, unless appropriately prescribed, because those can wipe out your gut as well. So that's really important. But there are lots of things you can do by eating organic, whole foods like fruits and vegetables, whole grains, diversify your diet, nuts and seeds if you don't have, a contraindication to that. Those are key things that you should do to improve your diet and your microbiome.
Well, that's good stuff, Doctor. And I know that there's a whole lot more that we can talk about, and then we'll talk about some of the things that are indications of when your microbiomes are off, because, if we can't get them measured, then maybe some of the other consequences are an indication. And that way people will have some more information when they go in and talk to their doctors, and at least they can bring it up, because, knowledge is power. But look, we've got a lot more to talk about. I'm glad that you're here for the whole hour. Let's take a break right now and then come back with more from Dr. Vince Marconi. Thank you for joining us here on HeteroHIV. We'll be right back after this.
Programming on Jazz 91.9 WCLK is made possible in part by the Reginald and Dion Smith Foundation, a proud WCLK business member. The Reginald and Dion Smith Foundation is a wellness awareness recovery network virtual community. They help people affected by HIV, those in recovery from substance use disorders, and persons looking for support to change habits that lead to poor health. The Reginald and Dion Smith Foundation is a judgment-free safe space zone for sharing healing solutions, finding understanding, and empowerment. More information at www.theherdsf.com.
And the test came back that my wife was negative and I was positive. I can't even begin to tell you the amount of people that I know, friends, family, that have died from this disease. So how blessed am I?
I had some really challenging days this summer. Extremely important that we participate in our own survival, because if you don't participate in your own survival, then you're most certainly complicit in your own demise.
So thanks for coming back. And doctor, so Tell me a little bit, please, about the effects of stress on long-term survivors. There's so many more of us now that, thank God, the medications are doing a fine job, but we still don't know exactly the long-term effects of some of the medications. But I think that stress and what we eat and all of those things are the things that we can control. Please talk a little bit about what you've seen and what maybe are some of the solutions for long-term survivors as it pertains to stress.
Yeah, absolutely. And first, I just want to say again how inspiring it is, as always, for me when I watch the footage of you and what you went through, Reggie and Dion and et cetera. I think was incredible, and it shows as a testimony to what if you can overcome the things that you went through, then we all can approach our own health in such a holistic and inspirational way. And the insight that you had, yes, maybe you didn't go formally to kind of training to do this, but you had the right wisdom and insight and paid attention to what you were experiencing that allowed you to reach those same conclusions is, I think, just absolutely admirable. And I hope the rest of the healthcare field can see to it in the same way. So yeah, I think in a similar way, stress, like your microbiome and your nutrition, impact directly to the immune system. And that's really the crux of all of the health and wellness in such a distinct way. So think about your mind and your spirit, which observes the outside world, and the microbiome in your nutrition, which is a direct experience also of the outside world, interact with the rest of your internal body through the immune system. The immune system is kind of right at that choke point between the outer world, from our nutrition to our exercise to our external experiences of stress and happiness, to the inner world, which includes our the functioning of our heart, the functioning of our brain, our muscles and bones, all those other things. And the immune system sits directly in between the two of these. And they do so through different mechanisms, whether that be the metabolites that are coming. These are byproducts of the bacteria that are metabolizing our food. It's byproducts of our food when it's used for energy, and through our hormones, which are the connection from our brain to that immune system. So when we visualize and see, for example, a stressful situation, we look out around us and something makes us feel threatened, there are actually hormonal signals that then go to the rest of the body to tell it to do things to respond to that stress. And one of the key areas that are affected by this is the immune system. So now, removing what triggers the immune system, what is it that the immune system does, both to cause potentially harm to us, because it can cause harm, and what benefits does it bring? So we break this into two different parts. One is called what we refer to as immune competence, and that's the part of the immune system that deals with things like HIV, for example, deals with pathogens like SARS-CoV-2 when it comes to COVID, or a bacterial infection. That's the sort of immune competence to get rid of those infections. That also includes the ability of cure strategies to be more or less effective, has to rely on the immune system. It's not done exclusively through drugs, right? It's actually needing your own immune system to be an effective, as you said, partner participating in care, right? So we need to start talking about this not as patient passive, give me med, but hey, right, I want to lean into this. I want to be empowered in this situation. I'm coming to meet this head on. And yeah, some of this is going to be drugs. Some of this is going to be food. Some of this, and when I say drugs, I mean medications. Some of this is food. Right. Some of this are other holistic approaches. But
there's that word again. You said holistic, and that's intentional. When you say holistic, you mean holistic, everything.
Absolutely, everything. And I'll tell you even about my own provider, who's a holistic practitioner, and I'll tell you about that later. But yeah, so that's that participation, and so that's the good part of the immune system. But the immune system, when it is triggered inappropriately, either it can't effectively do that first job we just talked about, or it gets triggered, say, from a threatened reality to do something, respond to something that's not really a problem. Okay. And that's what most of our stressful realities are, that we feel we're in a threatened situation. And so our bodies respond sometimes over or exuberantly than it needs to. And so that's what creates the inflammation, is when too much of the immune system is responding to where there's not an actual problem. And so when it does that, it starts turning inward, and it causes heart disease. It causes neurocognitive impacts. It causes our bones to become brittle, our joints to become arthritic. It causes all of these problems, muscle wasting. So what you want to do with your approaches, your holistic approaches, you want to cool that inflammation down, and you want to turn up that immune competence. That's the balance you want. But stress takes us to the exact opposite reality. It turns up the inflammation and it drops down the immune competence. And so what we want to do is reset that balance by changing our perspective of the world around us. And you may say, well, Vince, hey, I'm in a bad situation. I live in a rough neighborhood. I've got to deal with something other than this. I hear from my patients all the time, and I by no means mean to imply that one can completely ignore the reality that is around them. However, what we are empowered to do is make the decisions, have the discernment to know where the real threatened situations of life, limb, and otherwise happiness, and where are the ones that we ourselves often magnify because usually past traumas in our life. So we know, and I'm someone who's a survivor of PTSD. I lived in a combat zone for 6 years back in 2007. So I know that feeling of repetitive trauma. I know the impact that that has on our future life, where we do magnify our appreciation and perception of threatening stimuli in our reality. And that can lead us to feel constant feelings of stress, constant feelings of micro traumas and aggressions through our life, even greater than the actual insult themselves. So things like meditation and other wellness practices help us to make that discerning distinction between when is there a fire in my house and I got to get out, and when there's something that is insulting, that's a damage to my reputation, it hurts me inside, but can be put down away from my high priority issues, and I can find peace again. And so it allows me to do that, for example, meditation, where I can cool down that inflammation. I can allow my immune system to be strong and do what it needs to do.
So you've given a lot of credence to the fact that I've been practicing meditation. That seems to have been beneficial, and that science now understands that meditation and yoga are beneficial to wellness, and that stress, when I say scare yourself to death, it's more than just a euphemism. That the fear and the trauma that we feel creates a reaction that releases toxins in the system, and that the body will heal itself, but it's like you said, it can be hyperactive in a way when it's a fake move. You get a fake move, and that because of HIV, the body is so busy healing itself that the immune system is constantly working to heal itself, even with the help of antiretrovirals. That it's we need to be just cognizant of those things and take them into account. And I'm glad that you made the bridge between how the cure will actually work, and there's different uh, uh, techniques and the different ways that scientists are now looking at. I was just today listening to one of the approaches that the scientists in Canada are making towards one of the possible cures, and just all of the scientists that are working together. And so we want to talk a little. What before we go, I want you to think about two things. We've got a question from my good friend Aziz, and he's had a hard time losing weight, losing the stomach, and even when you do lose weight, it doesn't look smaller. In the context of what we're talking about, I'd like you to just think about that, and and even as it pertains to people that are living with HIV, because we're talking about people living with HIV, but I kind of think that we are the canary in the coal mine, because even when COVID came across, it was evident that our experiences had even more value, and that we have a lot to give. So what's good for us is good for everyone. But so we'll talk about that, and then let's think about how the sciences around the cure, and maybe you can help break down what people that are long-term survivors, what people that are, because the Black community, as a result of the traumas, are having the worst outcomes. And what can we do? What can we do? I mean, we can only wait on the scientists for the cure, but what can we do to try to mitigate some of the things that we're going through? So once again, if you're just joining us, I've got my good friend, Dr. Vince Marconi, with us. We're discussing a lot of topics, and you'll be seeing more of this information in social media as well. If you have any questions, feel free to ask us about those, and we'll be happy to get those answers for you. Other than that, we've got more information. We're going to talk a little bit more about the cures, the works that's being done on that, and other ways that we can empower ourselves in the community. We thank you for joining us now. We ask you to stick around. We'll be back with more right after this.
I think my favorite role play thing I've ever done was like the boss and secretary thing. It's just good to feel like a guy's a boss and like, you know, I get to be feminine. I've done that in my regular relationships because usually I'm the one who makes more money. So it can be weird with men when you make more money than them, even dating. It's very hard for them to almost see you feminine sometimes when you make more money than them. It's almost like, oh, you receive less because you have more in a sense, especially if he's not able to do even as much as you are able to do for yourself. It's kind of like sometimes you gotta hold your hand on yourself just to not make him feel bad, stuff like that. So those type of role plays I feel like help balance that energy out, help balance that dynamic out in a relationship.
So, you know, the work that we're doing here at the Reginald and Dion Smith Foundation, we've been focusing on the heterosexual community because there's a common misconception that this HIV is a gay disease. And we've come to find out, especially in our support groups, that there are a lot of heterosexuals that don't feel like there's a safe space for them to really share their strengths and their hopes and their experiences. And so we have those types of support groups inside of our virtual community, and we're able to do shows like this, HeteroHIV, and more. And if you'd like to see this work continue to go on, then we'd ask you to please consider donating. Consider donating to our cause. We don't want to have to rely on grants because they're very competitive and hard to come by. And we have a very small staff. We don't spend a lot of money, but we try to be powerful about changing the imagery and the information and the opportunities for all, but specifically for those that are heterosexual. So if donate now, you can text Heal HIV to 44321. That's 44321, and make a donation, please. All right. So look, what's going on with the cure? And my man Aziz wants to know why he can't lose the belly.
Yeah, so from the cure perspective, there's a tremendous amount of really incredible strategies right now that are just scratching the surface of where we can get to cure this disease. And I think they're taking, as a field, multiple different angles of how we can do this, whether it's harnessing the immune system through vaccines, through antibodies like the ones that were used similarly for SARS-CoV-2 that were very effective. There's also medications that modulate the immune system to help make the immune system stronger and to be able to fight HIV. There's also ways to sort of wake up the HIV within the cell, then it's hiding there and it's not able to be cleared by the immune system. So there are drugs, these called latency reversal agents that wake up that latent sleeping virus so that the immune system can then recognize it. There's lots of strategies that are really effective. Sorry, go ahead.
Just as a break-in, because that's an important part, the issue with not really being able to, because now we have long-term, long-acting. I'm taking the once every 2 months. I'm told that they have 6 months on in the shelf in the works, and a year maybe. So for some that might seem like a cure, but the big issue is that the virus hides, even though it's suppressed, and can't be transmitted because U equals U. If it's undetectable, which is copies that can't be seen below 20, and then it can be transmitted, but it's still hiding in the cells. So if we stop, say for instance, there was a disaster, or say, and we were talking about this earlier, and we're going to take it and this is what goes through my mind. Okay. So say that there's some political unrest in the United States, And as a result, the supply chain gets broken and we can't get medications. And people's viral loads they will start to rebound. Is that true? If people
It's
can't get
absolutely right.
medication, they'll start to rebound. Uh, because
Absolutely. Usually within 3 to 4 weeks. Some people can take longer than that, but that's about the average that a rebound happens after people stop medications.
Now, we weren't supposed to talk about this, but what would people do? What could people do? What I mean, as a strategy, I've thought about, even though I'm on the shots now, saving some of the old oral medications that I have as a backup, or and I have some experience with not having medications at all. So my lifestyle, I believe that I'm 67 now. I think that I could ride out, but other people would panic and stress out, and that would cause even more stress on the body. What would you consider as a strategy for people in an emergency situations? Let's say.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And individuals who are on long-acting injectables, like you're receiving, Reggie, it sounds like, they should have a backup supply, especially if they can't get, let's say, you had to go help a family member out in, say, California, and you just couldn't get back. Things kind of went sideways out there. You may not be able to have that injection, right? It's family. We got to take care of business, as they say. So you should be able to carry with you the backup oral regimen that you can take as soon as that time elapsed for when you were supposed to have another injection. So I do very much believe in that, and many of our patients do. Obviously, I want to be clear that we don't want the medications to expire, so you want to make sure you're staying up with keeping them more recent. But there are a lot of patients, because of the way refills happen, and they usually maintain additional supply, just kind of replenish the newest ones to keep on hold, right? Don't keep the old ones always old. Keep the newest ones on hold. And absolutely, things like that come up. Travel with that. If you're going overseas, make sure you have plenty of additional bottles. You can ask your provider to help you with that. And certainly, absolutely, without a doubt, one of the biggest problems we had with the pandemic is, and I'm talking about COVID here, there was a lot of fear surrounding that, right? And that's in part because of the way the battles were happening politically, and they were taking it out over our physical bodies, right? And that's the worst thing to do in a pandemic, right? You want there to be calm. You want people to make good, rational decisions. You want people to feel like, they're being looked after. And so for us, if we are in those situations, whether it be COVID, whether it be other, political unrest, what have you, the calm, cool, collected mind is the one that's going to react the best. It's the body that's going to be the most whole. So I totally agree with you. It doesn't mean you can't still be effective and do what needs to happen. In fact, that effectiveness goes better. You probably have heard the old curve about, panic and heart rate and effectiveness and response, right? When you have a low heart rate, you can't really react and do what needs to happen. When you have too high of a heart rate, you can't either. You become paralyzed. So you want to be right in that nice in between to be effective at responding to emergencies, but also not to be incapacitated and overstressed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, finding that equanimity. And I'm sure that people will have a lot more questions for us. And I'll just glad. Thank you for making yourself available and for all the work that you do. We'll keep the conversation going. And I want to take just one more break before we wrap things up. But I want you to please think about some of the things that might be really beneficial for long-term survivors to hear, as going forward. And we talked about the cure and the different strategies. How close are we to finding the cure? Do you think? Is my lifetime, your lifetime? We've always heard another 10 years. I've heard some really inspiring things from the scientists. What do you think?
Yeah, we already have what looks to be like effective progress in a number of these strategies that I think when I say the next 2 to 5 years, they're going to be tested in large numbers of patients. So a number of these have actually already been tested on small numbers of patients, and they're seeing signals in them. But what they need to do is we need to look at combinations now. That's where the real challenge is to see if these can be even greater in their efficacy and they can be more sustainable. So we're seeing signals, and we're seeing them in some people, not everyone. So that means these strategies already look like they're going to be promising, but we need to kind of modify them, update them. So I think in probably 2 to 5 years, you're going to see a larger scale study, which I think will have some impact. And it may not move to commercialization yet, because that's the final step of this, is moving to commercialization. But I do think in the next 2 to 5 years, you're going to see some really blockbuster strategies that will be tested for commercialization use.
Cool. Well, like I told my good friend Bernard, I'm going to stick around for that. And I want to come back when we come back and talk a little bit about the socialization of actually having a cure. The fact that are the trials and things that are being done now, are they being tested in the Black community, or long-term survivors? And just some of the, I wish we could game out some of those things, but let's talk a little about people's access to trials and the social impact of what a functional cure might mean for society. So you stick around for that?
Absolutely, I'm here.
All right. So let's take a moment out, come back right after this.
My name is Dion. I didn't want anyone to know that I was married to a man who was HIV positive because of the stigma attached to HIV and AIDS. I was afraid of people just judging me, and I did not want to be judged. We just held on to the secret. I think that 14 years silence kept me in bondage. I did not know how locked down I was until I got free, and I began to share who I truly am. Today, I really don't care about what people think or what people say. People who judge don't matter, and people that matter don't judge. There are so many people who think that it could never happen to them. If you're negative, you want to stay negative, and you need to do whatever it is to stay negative. I don't care how long you've known someone. It's still your responsibility to protect yourself. Use condoms. I am an advocate for condoms because I've used them for 25 years, and I know they work, and the way I know they work is because I still test negative. I love my life, I love my husband, my children, my grandchildren. It's been a lot of thick and it's been a lot of thin, but it's all been working. 25 years later, we're still together. My name is Dion, and I am greater than AIDS.
My man Usher said, "There goes my baby." That's my baby.
It's beautiful.
Actually, yeah, we got 39 years in now, and she's still negative. Thank God, yes. And I think that there are a lot of serodiscordant couples that are living with HIV, and what we found was, especially in the heterosexual community, that a lot of people have not shared their truths publicly, and you don't have to. But to share it with someone because there's secrets are stressful, and trying to hide is stressful, and that just goes with what you were saying. So, what do you think that how do you think a cure will shape the public's perception of HIV?
Yeah, really great question. And as you know, we now have 7 individuals who have been cured. One sadly has passed away from recurrence of his cancer. It wasn't the HIV, obviously it was gone from his body, but he had a relapse of his cancer and passed from that. But I think he had maybe 12 or more years that he was HIV free, which is amazing. And so I've met everyone but the last two that have been recently announced. That the 7th one has not come forward, the Geneva patient with an identity, but I'm hoping to be able to meet this individual in November. I think it would be late October, November. We're flying over to Paris and Switzerland, Geneva, Switzerland, to meet this individual if all works out. So each of them have told me the struggles that they've had from an identity perspective themselves, right? So as you know, there is an identity with every part of our lives, right? Whether that be where we're from, where we're born, the baseball teams we like, football teams we like, the soccer teams we like, as much as having disease. So I'm a cancer survivor myself. And so there's a part of me that has that identity, right? And I live with that, even though it's been 25 years since the initial diagnosis. It's always going to be a part of you. And so what does that mean after a cure, right? Whether it's a functional cure, whether it's an eradication cure, like with these individuals who've been cured from transplants, it is complicated, right? Because on the one hand, some of the individuals in the community no longer see that person as being a part of that. And I understand that, right? Because those individuals are no longer taking medications. They don't have the fear that goes along with dying from HIV should they not take medicines or should something happen, right? But by the same token, those individuals have lived with that experience. And so disenfranchising them from that also, I don't think is edifying for us as a whole.
Right.
We're you're part of that community, you remain a part of that community. But then also there's complications and challenges with the fact that one can actually get HIV again, right? And that's a strange reality. People don't often think.
Right.
So most of those individuals, many of them that I know, Adam Castillejo, for example, has talked about, I have to go back on PrEP, right?
Right.
And so, or go on PrEP.
Right.
And so, that's a kind of strange way of thinking.
Wouldn't that be a mind-blowing thing? I mean, so I've been cured, and now am I going to live the lifestyle? What kind of lifestyle am I going to live? I've been out here advocating, and now I have to be the I have to receive my own information. And the same thing is true for people that are not positive. So what about the trials? I know that cures are being worked on, and I was asking the question today, are we getting a good demographic mix of people to participate in the trials so that the efficacy of the cures are broad? There's a broad stroke that they're good for everybody. How can people participate, and what's the level of participation now?
Really terrific question, Reggie. And I think, again, some of this speaks to the harms that the medical and scientific industry have done over the years. We know the Tuskegee experiment that was done, 30s, 40s, et cetera, that horribly, when there was a treatment that came available for syphilis in the 1950s, that experiment continued on without telling these individuals, who were by and large Black men living in the South, that they could be put on treatment and cure them. They actually continued just to observe them. And that created a tremendous amount of harm and distrust that persists understandably to this day. And so part of that has been a completely understandable distrust of scientific experimentation, even where there are places that have larger populations of people of African ancestry to enrolling in these trials. And so we need to do a better part of allaying those fears, improving our trust with the community, and engaging better overall, right? Not just on the cure platform, but our healthcare. We need to make sure our healthcare is made up of people who are non-judgmental, who are also coming from the community, who are caring, thoughtful, and loving of their patients. Then I think we're going to do a better job of enrolling, even in the places that have populations that are representative. There's also the problem that some of these cures are taking place in cities and locations that may not have the same kind of makeup that we have, thankfully, here in Atlanta. And so those places have to work harder to reach out to communities of color, et cetera, who are not represented. I will say there is, I'm very impressed, and one's a dear colleague of mine at the CDC, Elliot Reyes, who is one of the global AIDS treatment directors, has been working on HIV treatment and resistance for decades, and I've known him for that. He lives here in Atlanta. He is now starting a cure program for engaging people in Africa and throughout Africa to participate in cure trials. And I realize that that's not our communities here. I understand that. But his point is saying, listen, if we're going to be developing cures, it needs to represent people all over the world who are affected and living with HIV, and not
True.
just those individuals in the United States, even if they're
Right.
not fully representative either. So there are moves in these directions, but we have to keep pushing the envelope. We have to keep advocating, both from the NIH side as well as from the actual investigators and community side to make this happen.
Man, I'm glad for the opportunity to be a community partner with Erase. You know, that's really, I wrote the book, and my life has been about finding a cure. And I always looked at it as finding an herbal cure. Some of the strategies that are being tested now by scientifically are things that came to mind. But of course, I didn't have the wherewithal to do that. But we want to. This is an attempt to share that information with people. And like I said, we'll continue to share this information through social media and beyond, because it's all a part of sharing information and changing the imagery around HIV. Because most of the imagery that we see today says that it's a gay disease still, and we all just need to work together. And that not only in the HIV community, but all together in the world. I mean, you know, it's a shame that things can be the way that they have been going, but we have the opportunity to do something different, and we're taking it. And so we're grateful for you and all that you do. And we never seem to have enough time to really get to everything, but I think we'll just have to do more of that. Thank you for offering yourself as a partner, a willing partner, and we'll continue to find ways to share more information. What would be your closing words, especially to my loving constituency of long-term survivors and seniors that are living with HIV? You know, thanks for sharing about the microbiomes in the gut, the stress and the importance of stress, you know, the cures that are coming along, and the socio-economic effect. What would be one thing that you'd like to leave with the audience as something that we can do to be empowered as it pertains to our journey with HIV?
Absolutely. And I first want to also acknowledge, as you said, the Erase HIV program at Emory that partners with Sister Love, with you, with others, to reach to each of these communities that are, every one of them are important. And only through these collaborations and together are we going to solve these challenging problems. And I would give tremendous hope to everyone that we are seeing a better day. We continue to climb up this mountain. But if we do this together, if we take holistic approaches and we work with our community partners, we are going to reach that cure in short order. I promise that to happen. But I encourage people, please reach out to me. Feel free. I'm happy to engage with them one-on-one and find ways that we can partner together in this.
Well, we're definitely finding ways to do that. And thank you for your generosity. Thank you for your spirit. Thank you for the work that you're doing in the community. And I look forward to doing much more of this with you, Dr. Vince.
I do too. Thanks so much, Reggie. Great to see you.
All right. That's Dr. Vince Marconi here on HeteroHIV, bringing the science, the knowledge, the information, and the experience, and hopefully something that you can take away from it to help maybe put a different spin on your lifestyle that will help you to have a better experience with life. Look, it's been loads of fun, but we've got to run. All right. Much love to and thanks to the Gilead Sciences for funding and supporting the series. We couldn't do it without Gilead. Their funding has been just the thing that we needed in order to make this all happen. I want to thanks to our team, Ty Freeman and Tanisha Baker, for their help with this web show. And of course, thanks to our wonderful producer, Matt Schick from Run My Stream, for putting this in the mix. Special thanks to my darling wife of 35 years. She's also the deputy director of the Reginald and Deion Smith Foundation. She's simulcasting this show to our support group and to other groups worldwide. And special thanks to all of those who participated in this program and to all of you for being here. Look, we are here every last Thursday of the month, and you can find us on demand in recordings on our Facebook and our YouTube page at the RDSF. We encourage you to join our Wellness Awareness Recovery Network, which is a virtual community that is our safe space for sharing healing solutions. Our contact information will be on the screen after the closing credits. One of my heroes, Harriet Tubman, said she freed hundreds of slaves, but she could have freed thousands more had they only known that they were slaves. Now, Harriet might not have been focused on what history would say about what she was doing. She simply did what was necessary to make herself and others free. We thank God for our guests, Dr. Vince Marconi, and his time and energy. I want to remind you that yesterday is history and tomorrow is still a mystery. So let's just keep the focus on what's going on right now. And if we do that, I'm sure we'll have our hearts and minds in the right place. Remember, unity does not require uniformity. We all want to be loved, so let the healing continue. Until the next time, peace and blessings.